welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this week. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope your week is off to a great start. I'm excited to chat with you guys and take a little bit of a deeper look in the transit of Mars in Sagittarius. Please make sure you give me a thumbs up if you can see this video, if you like it. And be sure to click the bell button below and subscribe so you're alerted as to when we have new videos coming out on the channel. I am titling this video, Taking the High Road. Some of you guys may have already seen the Sunday astro weather that we just did. I did take you guys through Mars through the 12 signs. Equally, I am definitely going to be touching on this in the December horoscope. So make sure you are subscribed so you get the alert for that so we can get that to you later this week. There's lots of different aspects going on with this particular trek of Mars. So we're going to break it down. We're going to take a look at what Mars is doing, what we might be expecting, some of the themes, and more importantly, how this is impacting all of us collectively. Now, we're going to see Mars in the sign of Sagittarius from November 24th through January 4th. Okay, so 2023 into 2024, we're going to have Mars in this particular sign. Now, if you're an Aries or a Scorpio rising, this is very important because Mars rules your chart. So you want to know when Mars is changing signs or when Mars is making aspects in the skies. Equally, Sagittarius rising, you're going to be feeling this pretty strongly as well. All the Sagittarius placements will be feeling it, but Sag Mars is going to have it in a particularly, Sagittarius risings will be experiencing this in a particularly strong part of the chart. Sun and Mars in your first house is really great for having a lot of energy and a lot of motivation to get things done. Equally, the mutable signs, you guys are going to be feeling this. So my Geminis, my Virgos, and my Pisces, you'll be feeling the effects of the mutable squares. You know, squares in general are the energy of Mars, so we feel some kind of pressure to act. So you guys might be feeling this a little bit as well. Now, I titled this video, Taking the High Road, because it's a figurative expression that means to choose the morally right or honorable course of action. Very Sagittarius, right? Even when faced with difficulties or challenges. And that's what we're going to be seeing with the aspect of the square. Now, often it involves behaving in a positive or ethical manner, regardless of negative circumstances or what you might be coming up against. So when someone chooses to take the high road, typically they're demonstrating qualities such as integrity, kindness, commitment to principles, even if there may be more difficult situations kind of going on. And it might require us to make a little bit more effort or take the honorable path. So I thought that was so appropriate with the squares to Neptune. Now, when we talk about taking the high road, right, I want you guys to think about this throughout the entire transit. This is about acting with integrity. Choosing to do what's right and ethical, even when faced with temptations or pressures to do or say otherwise. I feel like with the squares to Saturn out the gate and the closing square also with Neptune, we're going to see some temptation to do some dishonorable things, to be dishonest, to not be loyal, or quite frankly, to not be doing well by other people. Unfortunately, when we see Mars in squares to Neptune, we can see that there can be some deception and some tendencies to do some things that can be underhanded. Just because it's out there in the skies does not mean that we want to lower our vibration to that. This also means that we have to maintain some sense of dignity. So responding to situations with grace, composure, and respect, even in the face of conflict, is going to be very important. We may also be opting to resist retaliating, okay? Sometimes I can see retaliation with Mars squares, but I can also see passive-aggressive situations. So be mindful not to engage in revenge or harmful actions. Watch for being passive-aggressive Instead, you want to be seeking peaceful resolutions to conflict. This is a positive manifestation of Mars and Neptune in action. And we want to be exercising empathy in general, right? Regardless of what's going on in the cosmos, demonstrating understanding and compassion towards other people, even when they may be acting negatively or unethically. And a lot of this is going to be about removing yourself from the situation, taking a step back and going, okay, how can I have a better understanding of why this person is behaving the way that they're behaving? And maybe also being able to not necessarily overlook, but try to understand why people are hitting back or hurting other people back and try to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Besides that, something else that we want to be really focusing on, especially with the opening square to Saturn, is prioritizing long-term goals and long-term values. So right when Mars moves into Sagittarius, it's going to square Saturn in Pisces at 0 degrees. So this is important to be focusing on long-term goals and values rather than short-term gains that may compromise your principles. So think of like taking shortcuts and doing things that might be taking the easy way out or cutting corners. That's something else sometimes we see with these squares. Taking the high road is often seen as commendable, and it's the probably best approach to navigating some of the challenges that you're going to be seeing this month and avoiding conflict. It reflects commitment to personal growth, ethical conduct, and a belief that positive and honorable actions contribute to a better overall outcome for oneself and everybody involved. Now let's take a look and see, let's look at this ingress chart. So you guys are probably watching this on the 20th when it airs, but we got a couple days where we're still feeling the impact of that Sun-Mars conjunction. So I think you guys might have heard me talk about some stuff that's been going on with like the racing, the Formula One racing. We saw the SpaceX launch with the missile that's getting ready to be able to, you know, go to Mars and come back. They're testing for that. Interesting ways to see some of these the Mars Cazimi play out. Right at the tail end of the transit, we're starting to see Mars come into a sextile with Pluto. So it is changing, transforming, breaking something down. The energies have been so strong, and I think it's been really about getting to the bottom of situations that we really need to change. So hopefully Mars and Scorpio season has been good to you. I know it's been quite intense for a lot of people just based off of what I've seen in the comments. But let's take it to the 24th. So already, right, the first planet that we actually had enter into Sagittarius was Mercury. He's always, or generally always ahead of the curve. So think back to when Mercury squared Saturn. We're going to see a few days before the Mars ingress, the Sun will square Saturn. And right when Mars comes into Sagittarius, shortly after it will square Saturn as well. Likely you're already feeling the effects of this, the 23rd, the 24th, even though it won't hit till the 25th. Now, something to think about, right, with this particular ingress is that it's going to ingress at 0 degrees and it's going to square another planet at 0 degrees. Neither planet is in a position where it's kind of in its rulership. So they're both going to kind of be duking it out, or you're going to feel the pressure between the Sagittarius energy of your chart and the Pisces energy of your chart. Now, Mars is in a fire sign. So it's a little different than Scorpio, very different than Libra. We're going to see Mars do some things that are going to be a little bit more action-packed. Fire wants to make moves. It wants to be creative. It wants to have growth and life and action. It wants to have some adventure when it's in the sign of Sagittarius. So we're going to see a lot more physical changes and manifestations taking place during this period. Mars will spend about 6 weeks in this particular sign. As it goes through the sign, we're going to see a couple really interesting aspects. First of all, squares to planets in Pisces is going to represent some need to change. We're going to see a slight sextile briefly to the south node. So we're dealing with the past in some capacity, maybe in a positive manner. And a number of inconjuncts or quincunxes to placements in Taurus, which is going to represent kind of a blind spot. Taurus is 6 houses away from Sagittarius. So what likely we're going to feel like there is some need to take care of a task or having to kind of check things off our to-do list in the Taurus area of our chart. These two create an inconjunct, so they're not quite seeing eye to eye about things. But what's interesting is that Jupiter is the dispositor of all these planets in Sagittarius. So even though they're not making like a typical aspect like a sextile, a square, or a trine, the things taking place in the Taurus area of the chart does kind of reflect some of the themes of the Sagittarius area as well. Now, Sagittarius, right? All about learning, the bigger picture, our beliefs, travels, but more importantly, faith, philosophy, the silver lining, and the ability to rise above things. So that's what we're going to be kind of talking about throughout the next couple of weeks with all of these planets hanging out in Sagittarius. Personally, from my perspective, from what I've observed in transit and also what I've observed with clients' charts and people who have this natally, I have found that when Mars is in Sagittarius, that people are more so attracted to things where there are no limits, no boundaries, no rules. There can be themes about overriding rules or rule breaking that can definitely kind of come up with Mars in this particular sign. Equally, we might be feeling like we're pushing our boundaries or pushing our limits. Off the bat, though, that square to Saturn makes me feel like there is some sense of being cautious about overdoing it. So I have some hopes that maybe it's going to be tamed a little bit more than most Mars and Sagittarius transits. Now, like I said, Jupiter is the dispositor down here, and that means that themes that are going to come up are going to be about re-evaluating, right? Jupiter is retrograde, growth, resources, money, physical things, because Jupiter is in the sign of Taurus. And Jupiter will be retrograde until the end of December. So on December 30th, 2023, Jupiter goes direct. Yay, we're able to kind of reap some of the goodies of, Jupiter being direct in the new year. And we're going to see Jupiter go direct just after Mars squares Neptune. So kind of funky energies. It's almost like right when something is released or let go or cleared out, or maybe we make some kind of sacrifice, it comes with some, physical benefit or some kind of blessing. And keep in mind that we're going to see a number of mutable squares this season. I've been talking about, Sagittarius season for some time, being like, man, this is going to be one for the books where there's a lot of truths being revealed. But this will be a closing square from Sagittarius to Pisces. So this is about moving through uncertainty, fogginess, vague situations, fears, self-undoing, laziness, blockages, or limitations, okay? Now, when we look at some of the transits, a degree that came up a lot for me during this particular trek will be 24 degrees. We're going to see Mars conjunct Mercury at this degree. We're going to see Mars square Neptune at this degree. So I just want to remind you guys what the 12 degrees is associated with per degree theory. We can see themes like disappearances, okay? Something that disappears, someone that disappears, loss or things that we lose, secrets that have been kept, unexplored or unknown, fears or phobias. This is also about mental health institutions, mental diseases, hospitals and things in hospitals. That's the connection to 12 or Neptune. Things that are invisible or something that's hard to find. Medications, pharmacies, chemists, pharmacists, isolated places, outskirts of town, the vicinity of hospitals, prisons, and mental institutions. Monasteries, sanctuaries. Religious divine nature, to be in contact with the divine or God, hotels and management, things that happen at night or while we're sleeping or in a bedroom, air or by mistake, abysses, oil, gas, gasoline or gas stations, drug dealers, photography, photos, cameras, things that are false, insincere, counterfeit, things that are forged, false representation, vague or foggy, research, labs, science, sea, fishermen, fishnets, anything seaside, drowning, poison, godfathers, and flights to run away or escape. Now, I bring this up because we're going to see a lot of these things that are going to come up. They're already starting to kind of pop up, so it's interesting. So I anticipate that both through the Mars transit and the Mercury retrograde that'll be in this sign, we're going to see more information kind of coming up in regards to that. But in particular, squares between Sagittarius and Pisces, we see philosophical crisis that comes up because Sag is associated with the quest for truth and exploration and love of adventure. And then we see Pisces, that's down here where the square is, it's receiving because these are slower moving planets. And it's bringing about, some kind of crisis linked to spirituality, dreams, or subconscious. Challenge in faith. The closing square is about bringing a crisis of faith and a reassessment of one's beliefs and ideas. And there can also be a struggle to reconcile spiritual and philosophical perspectives, which I definitely think is going to happen. And then an integration, because the squares are not just about conflict. It wants you to integrate and work together. It wants the two signs to recognize that, hey, we actually have a lot in common. We're both mutable. We can both be understanding and be able to kind of work together. So it's about balancing the Sagittarius need for meaning and understanding with the Pisces themes of compassion and sensitivity. Okay, that's going to be the key challenge here. Now, for me, I think about themes revolving around releasing and surrender. For some people, the Mars, especially the Mars square Saturn, can be about sacrifice. So it can be about, recognizing the similarities because they're both mutable signs, adapting to the end of a cycle. A closing square suggests the need to release old patterns, beliefs, structures that no longer serve spiritual or personal growth. So it might be about surrendering to the flow of life and embracing a more intuitive spiritual approach. And yeah, kind of, obviously when I see Mars square Saturn, Mars square Neptune, rolling with the punches, being open to make change. Change is also to creative expression, because I feel like Sagittarius is associated with creativity and self-expression, while Pisces is about things that are more imaginative or creative. So this closing square is going to prompt some of us to reevaluate our creative endeavors, pushing for a more authentic and spiritually inspired expression. Balancing idealism with realism, because Sagittarius tends to be idealistic and optimistic, and Pisces is about blurring boundaries between reality and fantasy. And so having Saturn here is interesting because I think this is going to be about challenging individuals to find a balance between optimistic ideas and practical realities of life. I have found myself already this season being like, am I living in clown world? Why do some people seem like they're in a completely alternate reality? And their perspective is very, very, very different from a lot of other people. That can be the mutable squares. And obviously, it's going to give us the opportunity to navigate conflict, especially when I think about the Mercury retrograde and how Mercury will conjunct Mars, navigating conflict, returning to things that we used to argue about, uncovering some kind of truth or information and being able to reconcile. So there may be, inner conflicts relating to personal beliefs or dreams or a need for higher understanding. These may be external as well. And I think navigating these conflicts may involve introspection, meditation, and a willingness to explore the depths of our consciousness and actively taking time alone to reflect on why we react and behave the way that we behave, why we believe the things that we believe, and what are their motives potentially, or what motives are there out in the world that maybe is kind of stirring the pot and creating some of this friction and, causing more confusion and isolation. How am I seeing this, right? I'm sure many of you guys want to know what some of my hot takes are. It's not even Sagittarius season yet. And like I said, some of these things are already happening. I've been really kind of just mind boggled, I guess is the best term. Watching the TikTok stuff and all the stuff that's been going on in social media about the letter to America. So if you haven't heard about it, you probably live under a rock, but after 20 plus years, we're seeing a letter resurface that is supposedly written by bin Laden, the ex-leader of Al-Qaeda, that was supposedly written to America, basically more or less explaining why the supposed attacks on September 11th were orchestrated. I'm not going to argue for or against it. Don't want to get into that conversation and deal with the social media warriors, but I will say that it is a prime example, right? This was happening, I believe, right around the time that Mercury was entering into Sag, coming into that square with Saturn. And what's been interesting is to see all these Gen Zers, people who have Pluto in Sagittarius, who are now reading this letter and encouraging other people to read it and being like, oh my God, everything that I thought that was real is not real. And we're seeing some people who are shocked, some people that are sad, some people that are essentially having, I think, second thoughts or questioning the narrative of what's gone on since the events of 9/11. And it's very much steeped in culture and religion. And it's just a really interesting thing to watch. I'm not going to comment on it because I have my own opinions. But I definitely would say that it's a prime example. Mercury could be a letter. Now here comes Mars, where there's going to be the activists, the protests. There could be, people who are taking action and also challenging authority, or they're challenging and questioning, why was this, hidden? Apparently for some time, this letter was actually active on the internet, resurfaced, and then when it becoming popular on TikTok, then it was taken down. So, and then supposedly like TikTok stopped circulating or allowing people to use the hashtag or be talking on the topic, or it was harder to find. I don't know. I don't use TikTok, but prime example of some of those squares questioning, why did it go missing, or why haven't we seen this, or why didn't we hear this? To play devil's advocate, I also would question where did it come from, and how do we know that it's true, and what are the sources? And I'm not saying it's real or fake, but we have to consider with Mercury, in Sagittarius and the squares to both Saturn and Neptune, how do we know that this isn't something that was spun or put out there intentionally or circulated intentionally to kind of bring these topics up? Why? Because we're at a time right now where there's definitely a move or a motive for there to be empathy or compassion or justification for war. That's really what's going on. I'm not saying this is an example of it, but there's definitely some moves to do that. On the flip side, I think about, the empathic side of Neptune, and this could be about empathy and compassion for those who are being affected by some of these religious or cultural wars, foreign and on, domestic grounds. We see racial conflict, we see philosophical conflict, we see divide among, religious beliefs. We see these topics when there are squares between Sagittarius and Pisces. It is very common. Part of me feels inclined to tell you guys, get used to it, because Saturn's going to be in this sign for another 2 years, where there is a move to dissolve the limitations and the boundaries. You're going to hear a lot about inclusivity and merger and coming together and teaching things and fusing religion and belief systems so that everybody can get along. But that's also going to create some confusion. So there's going to be a lot of debate about that, I think, throughout this particular Sagittarius season, because Mars is definitely going to have it out with Saturn and Neptune and be like, what's the agenda? What's the purpose behind some of these things? We can't talk about Mars without talking about war. Unfortunately, this is the planet that is associated with war. But this can be talking about war and conflict in a global sense, where we are kind of picking fights with other people, but not really understanding really the core of why some of those conflicts came up that sparked war and then developed into, certain countries that are aligning and others that are not. I think for me, a lot of this is going to be about having empathy and compassion about those who are affected by war, right? That's the big thing. Reports are coming out that almost all of the young men who have been fighting in the Ukrainian war are now dead. And there is an average age of soldiers on the front line of 43 years of age. 43, that's the average. That means that, yes, you can have people who are younger, but you can have people who are a lot older. So it's really for me, such a sacrifice, such a shame, something that didn't necessarily need to happen. Sacrificing an entire generation of young men when there could have been a peace agreement 18 plus months ago. This is a prime example of Mars square Neptune. The acts of war that happened, the sacrifice that was made, but it didn't have to happen. We didn't have to have that take place. I think we're going to hear more about covert acts of war, kind of textbook Mars square Neptune stuff. It can be by water, right? Neptune. It can also be hidden attacks. Specifically, Sagittarius does deal with airplanes and things that are in the air and higher kind of levels of observation. So things involving air and water, and something else that came up, especially in the fixed stars, is going to be attacks of war that are associated with chemicals, specifically acid, things that can create blindness or issues with visibility, which we know is considered to be a war crime. There is definitely rules against being able to use such methods in war, but we may hear about that potentially happening. Or we may hear topics of this coming up from the past. I know in recent years there's been debate and back and forth about whether the United States has participated in some of these acts and has been accused of doing that, but it just mysteriously kind of gets covered up. So watch for that, unfortunately. We're going to hear more about issues revolving around shortages, okay? Mars is cutting things off or removing things. It can also be companies downsizing. We can be hearing about layoffs, but we can also be hearing about this in a sense of removing, right? So you're going to hear about doctor and primary care provider shortages, nursing shortages, pilot shortages. That's going to be a big theme in Sagittarius, but pilots, teachers, education, and anything in regards to health and private organizations. So some kind of cuts going on there. And I've heard recently in a lot of news headlines, shortages of generic medication. People not being able to afford basically designer drugs and being put in a situation where there are shortages of medications. And so people aren't able to afford the medications that they need. They're having to scale back on existing medications. And this is very Mars square Neptune, making sacrifices and the effects that this may potentially have. And also maybe rules and regulations, laws, Sagittarius, revolving around, what's going on with healthcare, what's going on with government intervention. I want more people to be talking about the fact that so many people, especially here in America, cannot afford their medications. I also want people to be talking about the fact that there seems to be some kind of motives or agenda to make that possible. So if people are having more challenges, they're going to be more willing to, maybe go in for, government health related programs thinking that it's going to be better, or maybe they're getting, retirement programs that they're getting involved in, and then they're actually really not getting the care that they need. It just might look better, especially some of these supplemental plans. I say that because Saturn represents older generations. And I think a lot of people need to be talking about what this agenda is going to do for those who are older, or those who are potentially handicapped, or, if they have any kind of physical or mental emotional disadvantage. And you're not hearing about that in some of the C40 cities. You're not hearing about the moves or the motives to be able to provide for the elderly, or to be able to provide for those who are disadvantaged. You're hearing about stack and pack cities, moving people into spaces where you're going to have a lot of people living in urban environments. But what about some of these particular programs that we need to have to ensure that our elders and those in society who need help are taken care of? So I'm hoping globally we're going to start talking about some of this stuff. We're going to start talking about the declining birth rate population issues, because it's going to be a very big deal down the road. Now, watch for themes revolving around divisive curriculum. This involves teachers or potentially professors, and I think more on the hidden agenda that's taking place in college campuses. In recent months, there's been a lot of people discussing where money is going into certain college campuses, and the funding of their institutions, and who's funding them, and also how that's influencing what's going on with their curriculum. So obviously race, culture, religious kind of divides, these are big topics with these squares, but college, universities, professors, higher education, teachers, philosophers, this is all Sag. Questioning and kind of calling on certain institutions, being like, what the hell is going on here? Where is this money coming from, and why is money flooding into some of these institutions? And more so, why the hell are parents paying for these educations only to watch kids come out of school and have a very distorted view of the world? I think these are all questions that people should be asking, especially considering the amount of money that it costs to get a college education right now. I think education in general is a huge issue. We see a lot of people who are not wanting to go to school for higher education. We're seeing people who are not opting to be, lawyers or doctors, or, professors, or people who are wanting to ensure that we have these positions in society that are filled, and that we have people who are well equipped also to be teaching younger people. So this conversation about the influence of a global agenda, or particular government entities that are intentionally, potentially trying to dissolve some of this and keep people from being able to act intelligent, to ask questions, to practice some sense of awareness, and maybe question what's going on in the world. I have hope that that can happen, because we all need to be practicing more critical thinking. Now, Mars and wars, right? I think about the war on pharma, and major potential pending legal battles against governments and other institutions in regards to rolling back Mandates, I can only say so much, but we can look at the potential one that's brewing here in the States against the current administration. We're seeing things like ex-police officers in the East Coast that are now going back, and they're going to be filing legal documents to be starting moves to basically say we're suing you because we had to quit our jobs because we didn't agree with these mandates. And so we're now, because there has been some legislation and there's also been some moves with recent cases, they have reason to basically bring some of these to court. That's all I can say on that. U.S. Army welcomes and requests back soldiers that were discharged due to mandates. Why am I talking about mandates? Well, Saturn and Neptune talks about boundaries and limitations within organizations that may be required, Saturn, and also deal with healthcare, mental health, physical health, medications, all Neptune. So now you're seeing Sun, Mars, Mercury in superior position, throwing down the gauntlet basically against Saturn and Neptune, being like, why did you discriminate? Why did you say we couldn't do this? Why did you tell us we had to do this? Why did we lose our jobs? Remember, Neptune is about those who are lost or those who are cast aside. Sagittarius is about raising this storyline, bringing it to all of our awareness and kind of showing us basically what is and is not right. It is about the moral, the moral thing to do, the right or wrong thing to do. So if Libra is the attorney, Sagittarius, I think would potentially be the judge. Vice versa, some people would say Sagittarius could be deputies or they could be sheriffs. I mean, they have similarities, but at least throughout this particular transit, we're going to see some sextiles between Sagittarius and Libra, and I have hopes that it's possible that we can see some just judges working to preserve the right of law. Big one for me, probably one of the scarier ones. I don't know what's scarier, potentially, having issues with an airplane when you're 30,000 feet in the sky because of negligent practices or your kids being indoctrinated in school. Issues with airlines, specifically visibility, and people who are being overworked, underpaid, and also potential issues with lack of training. So airlines are experiencing a pilot shortage. This has been going on for some time, and some of these issues date back almost 40 years to where we've been seeing just less and less oversight and certification, qualification for some time, but they are expecting limited numbers of air travel trips this season. So they're downsizing on the amount of trips that are taking place over the holiday season. Apparently, the NAS and the FAA has been highlighting critical issues within the FAA, so this is the Federal Aviation Administration, highlighting critical issues, primarily issues with understaffing and excessive reliance on overtime. So you have tired and exhausted pilots, baggage, people who are working the air control towers, and it's leading to, inefficient, practices and also safety concerns. They're saying that high overtime is leading to increased absentees, lower productivity, and fatigue among employees. So we've got a bunch of overworked people. They don't want to pay people full time, so instead they're giving people overtime, and they're expecting them to be just working nonstop and, overseeing people who are flying, in the sky, hundreds of thousands of people. So they're saying now they're going to have limited flight schedules, merging locations, and increased ground stops, which some of us sounds like, oh, that's inconvenient because we might have to go out of our way to get a flight, or maybe we have to have more connecting flights. Maybe there's less flights, but actually it's kind of scary because it's not just an inconvenience. It's going to lead to more landings and more takeoffs, which is going to bring about a heightened risk of errors or compromised safety. It's not just about the pilots, it's about the people who are working in the towers, it's the people who are also helping them land, the people who are moving luggage on and off planes. And now they're saying with the staffing shortages that they're urging FAA to consider a temporary pause on promotions for all current employees. So you have people who've been working their ass off for the last 3 years who have been forced to comply with ridiculous, requirements, from masks to all kinds of other limitations and frankly, loss of freedoms, putting up with a bunch of crazy sick people on airplanes. We've all seen the videos. And now they want to deny them promotions, which is only going to disincentivize people from wanting to actually like stay in their jobs and continue to do a good job in this economy. Oh, it gets worse. They want to expedite the training process at academies and bring on new pilots and air controllers, and they want to expedite them through the process. So they want to say, we want to do it in a way where they're not going to, they're not going to have less of an effective learning experience, but we want to do it more quickly. I don't know about you, but I would definitely think that pilots, among doctors and a few other professions, are definitely not people that we would want to see expedited quickly through a process to be able to get into a position, only because they have a shortage. Why are they having shortages? What did they require pilots to do in recent years? What did pilots say that they weren't going to do in recent years? Why did we have them basically like having sit-ins and also not coming into work or calling in sick? Why did we have all those planes ground, right? Think about it. There have been certain groups of people, pilots, nurses, firemen, cops, right? Some people in the healthcare field, some teachers, truckers, who have all been saying, I will not comply. So now we've got shortages and people who are not qualified or frankly exhausted, leading to more potential issues in the air, more accidents, more death, more loss, broken things aren't getting fixed. When the planes are grounded, you have people who are doing maintenance, checking everything, making sure everything is good to go. If you have somebody who's tired and exhausted, they may not catch everything, potentially putting a lot of lives at risk. So these are going to be some of the things that you guys are going to see because Mars is going to be in the sign of Sagittarius, because it's going to square Saturn and Neptune. A couple other things that I also noted is that, Mars is going to be making contact with a couple fixed stars. So there's a fixed star at 24 degrees and 25 degrees of Sagittarius. I bring this up because this is where the square will take place from Mars to Neptune. I also bring this up because this is where Mercury will be retrograding through. So it's going to retrograde over these degrees and it's going to conjunct Mars. So the first one that I have is a fixed star at 24 degrees of Sag called Leseth. And it's of the nature of Mercury and Mars, and it gives danger, desperation, immorality, malevolence, and is connected with acid poisons, okay? And then when Leseth comes together, basically it's right where the scorpion stinger is. It's considered an unlucky star. So in medieval times, these were said to be connected with poison. So poisons come up several times, okay? And 12 degrees can be poisons and things that are secretive and also like drug-related poisons. But I'm also wondering, like, not to be like a conspiracy theorist, but I've heard some people who have been speculating and saying some weird stuff about concerns about things that are being put in airplanes or like things that would be substances in airplanes. It got me thinking about that, and I was like, ugh, not during the holiday season. Then we have a fixed star at 25 degrees of Sag, and this is a fixed star called Achilles, Aculeus. I'm probably botching that, but when Mercury and Mars come together on this particular star, okay, so that's where it's going to square Neptune. It's got some interesting connections. So Mercury here can be about secret bad habits. And it can also be bringing up, issues with people who are feeling kind of like isolated or lonely. It's about violence or self-destruction. And it says if Mercury is negative, mental disturbances of any kind or mind-altering substances would bring bad behavior to the forefront. Well, Mercury is going to be in its fall, so that applies. Now, when Mars is involved on the star, which it will be, this is where we'll see the retrograde, secret bad habits. Again, we also see issues with violence and self-destruction. In certain situations, people can be heroic, courageous, and even defiant with a tendency to be reckless, thoughtless, inconsiderate, or even accident prone. So I think of you mixing like Mercury in its fall retrograde, which can be about mental issues and substances and mind-altering things, and then the square to Neptune. It reminds me of the recent headlines where we heard about supposedly that pilot that like took mushrooms and then was like having issues, grounding the plane. I want to laugh, but it's terrifying because, I mean, how much more direct specific does astrology get? You've got pilots, mind-related things, and then the square to Saturn and Neptune. Maybe we hear more about that, or maybe we hear more about like drug testing or screening or mental health screening, especially when it comes to, ninth house related ventures, not just travel, but it could be education, it could be law. We might hear more about some of these topics of people who are supposed to be kind of like implementing the rule of law and problems that, are going on with them mentally. Recently, I think it was in Los Angeles County, they said it was like 3 different police officers in the same department or the same like headquarters, all supposedly committed suicide like within like a several day period. Obviously trigger warning, but that is a Pisces topic: suicide, mental health, grief, loss, wanting to just, transcend. So I'm wondering, are we going to hear more about this? Is there going to be some weird thing that's going to happen on a college campus and it's kind of misconstrued and it seems like very false flaggy? Yes. What is a false flag? Mercury square Neptune, Mars square Neptune. So let's take it through. Let's take a look at the transits and let's touch on how this is going to go. So obviously on the 24th, we're going to see Mars enter into Sagittarius. And you guys know I like to look at the ingress chart. So with the Sun in conjunction to Mars in Sag, this is quite a spicy combination. It's kind of like coming out of the swamp that we've been in Scorpio, and now you start to kind of see the full effects. It's like the fireball with this conjunction. The squares to Saturn does make me feel like we're having to kind of push and add a little bit more oomph to be able to kind of work through some sluggishness. Yes, you can have some delays and some setbacks that can happen with squares to Saturn, but really it's checking you and making sure that, you're going about everything in an appropriate manner and you're doing it responsibly, and it will kind of tame some of the flames, I think, of Sagittarius energy. Now, it'll be on the 25th that we're actually going to see the Mars square Saturn perfect. So that won't be until the next day, but likely you're already feeling it from the time that Mars enters into Sag. But yeah, this is definitely going to be a day that you guys want to be mindful of, just slowing down, looking around, paying attention, taking your time. It's going to be especially potent because we are going to see the moon in Taurus come into conjunction with Jupiter, and this will quincunx or in conjunct the Sun and Mars. So it's almost as if like we're going to feel like there's like an inconvenience or an excess charge or something that comes out of the blue where we have to spend a little bit more time, money, resources to deal with something. Because Jupiter is the dispositor of Sagittarius, that means that whatever's going on with Jupiter is reflecting Sag. So Taurus is money, resources, food, cost, growth. It can also be about some of the themes revolving around inflation. And it can also be more about some of these themes regarding agriculture or banking and banking institutions. So likely, if there is some kind of inflamed energy revolving around conflict, war, especially something in another country, we might see some financial reflection of that or some kind of pop or shift going on with the markets. This is going to be the day after Thanksgiving. So I'm also wondering if this is just going to be a lot of people who are rushing into being like, oh, there's going to be a shortage, I need to buy this. Be very careful with your Black Friday spending. There's definitely going to be a lot of increased prices only to make things look like they are at a deal, but really you might be paying just as much, if not more. And this is the blind spot that we don't necessarily see with Sag, making the quincunx or the in conjunct to Taurus. I don't think you need astrology to tell you that. I think that's just kind of like, marketing 101. That's a lot of how things are going to get you. But if you go and you look at some of the prices of the 30 days leading up to the sales, you may find that the prices were exactly the same and then bumped up just prior to you getting your deal. So watch for those blind spots. But definitely we're going to feel the effects of the Mars square Saturn. And I think this is going to be people starting to realize that people are not working like they have been or have been in recent years. People are not buying or spending like they have been. And I think that when the retail companies start to really realize the real effects of, consumers not purchasing like they used to, even in the midst of holiday season, we're going to start to realize that the issues with inflation and the slowing down of the economy is a much bigger issue than I think we thought it was. Now, then we're going to take this to the 3rd of December. And this is going to be the next big aspect, although it's kind of hidden. And this will be when Mars comes into an inconjunct or a quincunx with Jupiter, which I think is really important because, well, Mars rules Jupiter, right? And, Jupiter rules Mars. And remember, guys, that the North Node is also the connection to Mars. So whatever's going on with Mars affects the North Node. So when we had Mars square Saturn, it was saying we personally are feeling limited by an outside source, an outside energy. When we see Mars in conjunct Jupiter, we are personally having some challenges revolving around faith when it comes to money, resources, and food. This is also where foreign wars are impacting our pocketbooks. I saw something this week that said that, like, apparently since the start of the pandemic, IKEA has, in some circumstances, risen some prices over 100%. But generally, in the last year, they've risen some of their prices by about 9% on some of their products. And now they're claiming that they want to scale back and they want to bring their prices down because they're seeing that people aren't buying as much stuff. But they were citing or claiming that a lot of this was due to the effects of the Ukrainian war. Well, I think they're a Swedish company, right? I think. Yeah, they have their meatballs. Hello, can you tell I have a second house stellium? I'm like, oh, IKEA meatballs? Anyway, but it would make sense that maybe they would have some impacts because of what's going on with the war. But I think more of this is just kind of like, what else is this going to affect? Ceres is very close to these conjunctions. It's been conjunct this entire time. So conflict with war, issues with grain, issues with bread, and grain isn't just about bread. It goes into beer, it goes into alcohol, right? All that's going to come into a square with Saturn. So we might see that effect as well. But where conflict is actually creating issues, getting products imported or exported out of areas, and we're seeing increased costs, right? People are already hemming and hawing at the grocery store, which is crazy to me because I also think that something that you guys want to be mindful of is that Sagittarius is marketing. It is watching a commercial. It's looking at a package and what it looks like and what it says. Shrinkflation is a thing. So there's two things that I want you guys to be watching for. Prices that are coming down on products, and they may look like the same size, but you're going to get less material. You're going to get less goods. So whether it's, a box of cereal, which may potentially look like the same box, but it's going to have less ounces in terms of the food, or canned goods, or maybe when it comes to, price by ounce for things like milk or eggs, whatever, you're going to see that shrinkflation is going to be a thing. Less food, looks like the same size, and it's going to cost less, but you're getting less food. So you're paying the same amount, but you're not going to get what you should be paying for. So marketing campaigns and schemes to really try to encourage people to think they're getting a deal or think they're getting more, really they're getting less. Here's a fun fact. Throughout history, especially in the United States, when we have seen, especially if you read the labels on calories, if you're looking at calories per serving, and that the calories per serving is coming down on packaging, they did that, okay, the FDA did that in preparation for rationing food. So the weeks and months leading up, they would start dropping the calories per serving so people wouldn't freak out thinking that they were getting less calories. Can that work now that everything has a ton of sugar and carbohydrates in it? I don't know, but that's something else that I would be looking at, is not just the serving size, but also what is in the food, the amounts of calories, and what is being recommended. If you're somebody who buys and takes a look at these things regularly, compare them, maybe take a picture of them, write them down, and let me know what happens during this period. Do you start noticing that serving sizes are having less amounts? Is it less calories? And are you noticing the shrinkflation that I'm sure we're going to start to see? Now, when we see Mars in conjunct Jupiter, we see conflicting energies. Because Mars represents energy and assertiveness and the drive to take action, Jupiter is about expansion, growth, and abundance. So something's not adding up. It's like, okay, so, you're doing this action, but is it really materializing to making more money, right? Or you're making these moves to help people, but is it really actually helping people? So I'm going to be looking for like foreign aid. Are we sending more foreign aid somewhere? And like, is it really costing us what you're saying it's costing us? Or is it costing us actually a lot more? And are we having to send more because we're having to overcompensate for, I don't know, inflation? And overdoing things is a theme. So there can definitely be a tendency to overextend or over-exaggerate actions and ambitions. Impulsiveness and overconfidence could lead to taking on more than what we can handle. Especially when it comes to Taurus-related things, buying, spending, consuming, all of these things, extra expenses that we really can't or should not be taking on. And I think a lot of people are already feeling like coming into the holiday season, like, man, how can we handle higher food prices? How can we handle higher energy prices? These are, Taurus-related things right now. And frustration and adjustment, because man, the inconjunct, it's about adjustment. It's about learning how to make change. So Taurus doesn't want to change. And Sag is kind of like, hey, change is the name of the game. So what you guys want to work with is actually when we start getting into the trines with Aries, we might find that the changes can be positive. They can be good. But frustration, can arise from conflicting desires for action and expansion, and adjustment is required to balance the need of assertiveness and also the need for strategic growth. So Sag is like, don't worry, everything will be fine. Everything's good. Let's just do it. Book the trip. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's do that. And then there's the bank account that's like, oh, can you? That especially with both of these planets retrograde. And I think that, Taurus likes to be slow and stable and calculated, and Sag is just kind of like, nope, here we go. We'll figure it out when we get there. And I don't really recommend taking that path forward right now, because I feel like we do need to be keeping our values, our resources, our financial goals, our physical bodies, all of those things in check. Now, we'll see on the 12th, although this isn't a transit involving Mars, it gets an honorable mention. We're going to have a new moon that's going to be in Sagittarius. And so what you're going to see with this new moon, even though it'll be at 20 degrees, we're going to see the moon come into conjunction with Mars right before we have a new moon. And what I like is that Mars and the moon are kind of coming into a trine with Chiron. So it's kind of being like, yes, I believe I can heal it. It's like Thomas the Train. I think I can. I believe I can. And so there may be some like last ditch effort to like cut something or make a move or make a change on December 12th. Now this new moon at 20 is within an 8-degree orb of Mars. So it's a new moon that's very motivating. It's action packed. We just had another one that was in Scorpio that was also, Sun, Mars, Moon in Scorpio, although that was in opposition to Uranus. And this one at least is going to be in a trine to the North Node. I don't know. I feel like the Scorpio new moon was about getting out of our own way and having some shocking realizations. And then the new moon in Sag is kind of like, okay, yes, we can do it. Let's go. So now that we've moved through the shock and surprise, this is a really nice time period to really be like, I believe I can achieve it, and be really setting our sights on maybe having more freedom or having more capabilities in the springtime. Now on the 15th of December, we're going to see Mars come into a trine with Chiron. And Chiron's still retrograde. It's at 15 degrees. And Mars is going to be trine, so this is a harmonious aspect. That's where this blue line right here. Basically, this means, as long as we are making moves and taking action, or maybe taking a risk or taking chances, or feeling a little bit more optimistic about what we can heal, what we can work on within ourselves, what action we're taking to feel more confident, what we're learning about, places that we're traveling, to be able to kind of open us up to realize and recognize that we're not alone. And I'm looking forward to this transit because I feel like you could find that there's some kind of unification among cultures, religion, race, genders, countries, where people are starting to look around being like, yeah, you know what? Like, we're also feeling isolated over here too. And you're going to see where a little bit of individual awareness allows, therefore, to be some kind of collective gathering, teaching, education, sharing, maybe lessons that we've learned, and sharing it with other people can be very healing and very therapeutic throughout that particular transit. So I would watch for that, especially with words, social media, communication, letters, because that's going to be at a 15 degree. And then we're going to see on the 21st, we're going to have Mars come into an in conjunct quincunx, and that will be with Uranus. So that'll be right here. Similar to the same aspect we saw with Jupiter, so kind of reconciling, trying to kind of deal with the blind spot. A little bit more challenging, a lot more challenging. Mars quincunx Uranus is definitely going to be a very unpredictable energy. And because Mars represents assertive, dynamic energy, when it comes into the inconjunct with Uranus, you don't know what you're going to get, okay? So Uranus is very sudden, it's unpredictable, it's also about change, and Uranus is also retrograde, so this is internal. So it's almost like where there's external events, Sag, having an impact on our internal feelings of security, stability, resources, financial security. And this is a lot of people probably kind of getting riled up by some of the things going on in the world, questioning, how does this impact me physically or financially? Or how does this affect my my finances? So what we might see is that there could be sudden actions, a tendency for impulsive or unexpected actions. I'm anticipating a need for freedom and independence that could clash with Mars's desire for direct and purposeful action. This is where the money is creating, conflict in international relations. This is where the banks are perhaps behind, I think, a lot of the conflict in the war. This is where we see issues with money and advertisers. I saw it with Dana White recently, how apparently advertisers were telling him that he can't be talking about who he wants to vote for, and he was like, fuck you. I'm gonna vote for who I want to vote for, and you should too. And he was really vocal about that. And that's such a prime example of where money and possessiveness and greed and influence is having such a strong impact on Sagittarius stuff. It was doing the same thing in Libra. So Libra was relationships, courts, balance, equality, fairness. Now this is going to be how it's impacting advertising, education, belief systems, travel, right? So there's going to be also probably some kind of narrative that's being pushed about some kind of agenda that is going to be very much focusing on either culture or ethnicity or beliefs. Okay, so, and where the money behind that could just be a big marketing campaign to just get more people that are going to be riled up and be talking about this thing. Mars could be sports. That's the other thing. It could be sports. So I think of like, the conflict over, people being upset that Kaepernick took a knee, during the NFL games. Some similar stuff. I think you'll see some similar things with this, and where some people do not or will not bend, or they're taking action, or they're doing something to show support for people who have fallen, and the banks or some financial institutions being like, or you will do this. So they're going to have some influence on the agenda. Watch for potential disruption. So, this aspect brings disruptive or erratic energies, and it expresses this energy in a very loud manner. Likely there will be some conflict between desire for stability and the urge for unconventional actions. Being, flexible and adapting is kind of required with this aspect. So it's about managing the unexpected twists and turns that may arise, and flexibility in handling some of these challenges, and an openness to change is really the focus here. So watch for that. I do feel like a couple days later, like when the moon starts coming into the in conjunct with Uranus and Mars still, you'll also feel this on the 23rd. And then on the 25th, finally, we start to get a nice aspect. So this will be Christmas for those of you guys who celebrate. We'll have Mars in Sagittarius trine the North Node. Yay. So this is like, finally, we're getting somewhere, right? So when Mars trines the North Node, it also sextiles the South Node. So this is kind of a nice aspect because it means we're moving away from what we've cut and lost, especially since the solar eclipse in Libra that we had in mid-October. And we are taking action towards our destiny and our future and what we're hoping to kind of achieve. So something that's being reworked or taken care of, in the Sagittarius area of your chart is positively influencing the areas of Aries in your chart. Now, when Mars and Sag trines the North Node in Aries, obviously this is positive. It's about, making moves towards the direction of where we're going for growth. And I feel like this is super positive. I'm really excited to see this because we haven't really seen, other than like when Mars was in a trine with Saturn, we haven't really seen, and even that was just kind of like emotional, sensitive, moody, coming to terms with something. Now we can see Mars really do something with this particular aspect. What's going to come of this? Energetic pursuit of goals, because Mars has a lot of energy and drive, and Sagittarius is about enthusiasm. When it trines the North Node, it's going to amplify the motivation to pursue goals with a sense of purpose. So you're going to see something kind of align. Also, alignment with personal growth. I think that the North Node represents the direction of where we're going on an individual level to grow and develop currently. The trine from Mars is suggesting that we're taking bold, adventurous actions and is in harmony with our individual path. This requires courage and innovation, which Aries does very well. And I think the trine is just going to further kind of accentuate these qualities, making it a favorable time for us to take risks, initiate new projects, and assert ourselves with more confidence. Watch for opportunities to explore your beliefs, because I think this aspect encourages individuals to explore and act in alignment with our personal beliefs, contributing to a sense of authenticity and purpose, which is so important for Sagittarius. Independence is going to be a theme because the trine supports the expression of individuality and a willingness to take the lead in our own life. Physical activity and adventure, optimism and positivity, especially with that trine because it's a Jupiterian energy when you see a trine. So it's going to amplify a sense of optimism and belief in our ability to overcome challenges. And I think that stems from also the fact that we saw like first the trine to Chiron, which is like, yeah, this was challenging, but we worked through it. Then we see the trine to the North Node. Anything is possible. And then we see Mars square Neptune, which is basically completing a cycle. It's saying, we're getting out of our own way. We're finally waking up, getting out of bed early, getting sober, taking action, having more faith, practicing a sense of being much more connected to our higher selves. So that's cool because there's this almost like this energetic momentum that's kind of pushing us forward as we're coming into that closing square. And I think it's a time where we're here to kind of feel more confident and experiencing more of a sense of being in flow, with our goals. All right, so then we're getting to the end of the transits. This takes us to the 28th. And on the 28th is when we're going to have this little ditty right here. Mars in conjunction to Mercury retrograde. This will be at 24 degrees. And this is also going to be squaring Neptune. So this day, December 28th, is a very confusing day. Not the best time to be flying back home after the holidays. So if you're somebody who's like, I go home for Christmas, but I come home before New Year's, this is not the day. This is not the day to do that. Just wait. And also avoid when the moon is also in Virgo. You want to do something maybe when the moon is in Leo. Because visibility, major issues with weather, I pray to whatever is out there in the cosmos that this is not one of those horrific, oh my God, somebody fell asleep or didn't see that there was a part missing or some issue with an airplane. I don't say this to be a fearmonger, but not the time that we would want to hear that. This is also about, misunderstandings, miscommunications, not seeing something clearly, visibility issues. This is going to be the day that there's going to be some problems. So some themes that I see with this conjunction and the square to Neptune is confusion, because Mars is supposed to be about action and Neptune is about illusion. So this can bring confusion regarding the course of action and unclear motivations, flat out dishonesty or manipulation as well. This is going to be energy draining, because it's a challenging energy. You know, Mars is trying to muster up, drive, and focus, and there isn't any energy there, and it's hard to kind of communicate or explain in some sense. This is also heavy with, you know, how substances are impacting or influencing how we communicate what we learn or where we're going. There can be a sense of having conflicts between idealism and reality because, you know, obviously Neptune is idealistic visions, and the practical realities of Mars kind of come into conflict. So it's hard to find a balance between dreams and taking concrete steps forward. You factor that in with Mercury in its fall, and it's like, I'd be very careful at the end of the year, the things that you see in the media or in the news, and something revolving around falsified images or stories of war or conflict or attacks. And it's going to be right around the holidays, unfortunately. I also feel like there can be some strange and suspicious things going on with stuff that goes missing. And remember, 24, right? Hospitals, medications, doctors, foreign lands. It's also film or photography, and things that are going to be of Sagittarian nature. And I think that I would be questioning the narratives that are coming out in the world around this time, because in my mind, I keep thinking like there's a lot of optimism through Sagittarius season. Everything's fine. Don't worry. We're good. Everything's good. Don't worry. Don't question things. And then we realize, like, wait a second, we've sent a ton of money to a country, assuming that we were involved in fighting some war that we're not. I say we're not involved, but they're not winning. And then we see other, you know, horrible acts that are happening in other places that are somehow connected to terrorists, or so we're being told. And I think that this is where the story or the narrative in regards to either one of those topics begin to kind of turn. And remember, like I said, Jupiter is the dispositor. So really you have to question what's going on here, you know, follow the money. And I think it's just about getting a lot of people to the goal post, which is really the end of the year. And then we're going to start to realize, oh, okay, well, economically things aren't as great as people thought. They don't want to scare consumers right now. That's what's going on. They want to get people just far enough till we get to the new year, and then they're going to start laying down some of the truths, unfortunately, about the real state of the economy, the real state of what's going on also with our foreign affairs, and also the true state of, I think, the future of travel, and the future also of issues revolving around further conflict, unfortunately. So deceptive actions is expected. You know, be cautious about deception, either from others or self-deception, you know, especially because Aries, the connection to Mars. I'm hoping that the astrology manifests in a way where there's people who are going to be brave enough to say, you know what, I was wrong. And I'm sorry for calling you crazy, right? Squares to Neptune. Or I'm sorry for calling you a conspiracy theorist, or for suggesting that, you know, you didn't know what you were talking about, or I didn't see it clearly. I didn't have the facts. I didn't know. But once we do get the information and the facts, it's going to be, well, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to say? What are people going to be doing to be taking a stand against some of these Neptunian things that are going on right now? This is the wool that's being pulled over everybody's eyes, and it's being displayed as cultural, religious, you know, divide, but it's really, I don't think it's those things. I think that people have a tendency to be more kind of middle of the road. I don't think that people are as extreme as what's being kind of projected in the media. And when we start to kind of realize that, we have the opportunity to go, you know what, if we all just take small collective steps forward to heal ourselves, to take responsibility for the things that we say and the things that we do, we have the opportunity to be able to overcome some of these situations. And as a whole, globally, start to kind of, challenge some of the narratives that are being put out there. Obviously, it's hard if we have some people that are functioning in some of these lower octaves where they are being deceptive or dishonest, or there are some secret motives or attacks or passive aggressiveness. We also have the whole other side of Pisces, which is people who are having escapism tendencies. because this square is saying, hey, we have to take action. You know, we can see that there can sometimes be a trigger to desire to escape from challenges or conflicts, and it might manifest as avoidance or seeking refuge or fantasy, substances, drugs, alcohol, distractions. So now is the time to act, not to step aside and go, oh, it's not my war to fight, it's not my problem, you know, because you will continue to see this until they come for you. Because it'll be some fringe groups, and then it'll be people a little bit closer, and then it'll be, you know, your country. And when we don't stand up for people who are being oppressed, at some point it's going to come for the everyday people. The same way here in America, some people who are living out in the sticks are starting to realize that it's starting to come out of the cities. It's starting to affect other areas. It's not just, oh, I'm safe, you know, out in the woods, or I'm safe in the suburbs. We're going to start to see some of this conflict come in. It's seeping in, right? So for me, the biggest theme, I mean, I probably should have titled this spiritual warfare, because that's really what this is. Mars is war, Neptune is spirituality. So with Mars being associated with the ego and personal desires, and Neptune is linked to spiritual transcendent dimensions, likely there's going to be an inner conflict between personal ambitions and desire for spiritual growth. And so what's beautiful about this is that through the Mercury retrograde, rethinking, reworking, walking back our actions and why we think and say and do what we do, likely in an outrageous manner, we can rework some of those things and figure out actually how can we be better, or are my actions in alignment with what I truly believe in? And so this is where we're going to see some really interesting stuff, where you're going to see some people who are like devout Catholics or Christians who are going to say, oh, you know, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, this, that, and the other. And I'm not calling these groups out, but then you'll see where they're actually like saying some really hateful things, you know, or like doing some really aggressive things, or certain cultures, right? It could be like a cultural thing, and some backlash maybe that's coming, Mercury retrograde with Mars, about, you know, changing direction or changing stance on a cultural matter, and the conflict that potentially kind of comes from that. You know, I think that, like I said, I have hope that enough people are going to be willing to look around and go, actually, no, I don't have to criticize other people and put them down. And this is going to be a time where if you really are somebody who is practicing a faith, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You can't pick and choose cafeteria style what you're going to participate in and then condemn other people. Once again, I'm not religious. I've had my fair share of studying that stuff. And personally, I think Jesus and I would have gotten along just fine. He likes wine. I like wine. He hung out with a bunch of, you know, people who were a little fringy, right? I'd be considered fringy. So I feel like he would have been my dude. So it's not my job to judge other people. And that's how I try to think about things when I think about Mars, Neptune aspects. It's like, it's not my fight to fight. It's my job to practice compassion, understanding, and also looking out for people who really either don't know any better, okay, I'd like to think, or people who really didn't have a chance to begin with to get the bigger picture. So rather than creating conflict, it's my job to be like, look, we have to be sensitive to other people. That means that also there's going to be some sensitivity boundaries that are going to come up. We may find that, you know, there is a sense of there, you know, being issues about being clear about personal limits and respect to personal boundaries. That's going to come up with this. And people are going to get really, really sensitive. We're going to see a lot of social justice warriors over these topics of people arguing about who's stepping over whose boundaries and this, that, and the other. But I think that if we can lean more into the spiritual side of Sagittarius, of teaching and showing the way, and also practicing compassion and empathy and understanding, Pisces, we can learn to be vulnerable. We can learn to have debate without having, you know, fist fights and conflict and war. We can learn to be more mindful of people and situations around us and to actually learn something rather than be questioning things. And we can move through some of these issues with spiritual warfare with a sense of awareness, and also, I think, be able to find a harmonious balance between these aspects. So we learn to stop fighting each other and we learn to kind of all get on the same page. Eventually, in the new year, we will see Mars come into Capricorn. You know, you'll see on the 28th, not only does that conjunction happen, but then we see Mars square Neptune, so that's the day to watch. On the 4th of January, Mars enters into Capricorn, so it's going to move into a sign where it's exalted. So that's going to be a video for another day. But that more or less is going to be Mars going through Sagittarius. I hope that that was helpful for you guys and giving you a little bit of insight in terms of what to expect during this transit. Please, everybody, take the high road. Try to be mindful of the conflict and the division and the intentional manipulation that's coming. Let me know, how are you feeling with these energies? Are you seeing it already? Obviously, this is going to be a little bit different now that we've got both Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So this is a little bit of a different flavor than we've seen in recent years. Are you somebody who natally has Mars square Neptune? If so, I'd love to hear, especially in the closing square, but in any capacity. Leave us, your thoughts on the matter. It might help some of us navigate some of this, especially if you've got squares in the mutable signs. I'd love to hear. Make sure you check out your November horoscopes. I do, talk about this ingress. I also will talk about this in the December horoscopes. And you guys can catch me here again on Thursday. I'm hoping, my schedule is crazy. I'm hoping we can get the horoscopes out this week because I'm going to be doing a little bit of traveling. So I'm trying to get everything out on time. But yeah, make sure you comment, you subscribe, and I will see all you guys back here on Thursday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you then. Take care.